Cassie Wilson was 34 years old, and every single dollar in her bank account was spoken for before it even landed there. She had a system, rent, utilities, groceries, gas, and just enough left over for the occasional coffee with her best friend Charlotte. It wasn't that she was careless with money, quite the opposite. She could stretch a paycheck like few others, clipping coupons, comparing prices, and knowing exactly which store had the cheapest deal on coffee or laundry detergent. But no matter how precise, her budget and comfort always seemed just out of reach. By day, she worked as an accountant at a small marketing firm in Portland. People assumed accountant meant stability, maybe even a little luxury. They didn't see the reality: long, grueling hours, especially during tax season, a salary that barely covered her expenses, and the emotional toll of being undervalued in a place where her hard work was often invisible. Her boss, Arnold, had perfected the art of stealing credit. He'd sit in meetings with clients, present Cassie's carefully calculated strategies as if they were his own, and then accept praise with a smile that made her stomach twist. Coworkers weren't much better. Derek, the golden boy of the office, somehow managed to leave early, almost every day, leaving his unfinished work on Cassie's desk with a casual, "Could you just handle this for me? You're so much faster at it." She never complained. Complaining she'd learned just gave people ammunition. Instead, she stayed late, finished the work, and drove home to her small one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city, exhausted. Work drained, her family gatherings didn't exactly recharge her. Her parents had divorced when she was 14, remarried within 2 years, and each built new lives that didn't have much room for Cassie. Her father, Gregory, a high school physics teacher, was married to Stephanie, a real estate agent, with expensive tastes. Her mother, Diane, had married Warren, a businessman who treated generosity like an investment. If it didn't benefit him, it wasn't worth doing. Then there were her siblings. Lisa, the younger sister, was the golden child, Ivy League graduate, married to a surgeon, living in a picture-perfect home in the suburbs. And Jason, the older brother, was charming but unreliable, bouncing from job to job and borrowing money like it was his personal skill set. Every holiday dinner was a minefield of backhanded compliments, comparisons, and helpful advice about her career, her apartment, and her single status. Cassie learned to smile through it all, to nod politely, to change the subject when the conversation edged too close to her personal life. But the truth was, she was tired. Tired of defending her choices, tired of feeling small in rooms where she should have felt safe, and tired of being the one people came to for help, knowing they'd never return the favor. Her life on the surface was stable, but under the surface, it was a constant balancing act. One unexpected bill away from disaster, one more uncredited project away from burnout. She didn't know it yet, but that quiet, measured existence was about to be ripped open by 6 little numbers and a twist of fate she couldn't have imagined. Cassie's 34th birthday should have been like all the others, quiet, predictable, and over before it had the chance to feel special. That afternoon, after another draining day at work, she stopped by Gus Corner Market, the same small store she'd been visiting every Friday for years. Gus, the silver-haired owner, with a warm grin, greeted her the way he always did. "Happy birthday, Cassie. Big plans tonight." She smiled faintly, nothing wild, just the usual, maybe with an extra ticket for luck. Instead of letting the machine spit out random numbers like she usually did, Cassie paused, pen in hand, and began choosing each one with care. Her birth month and day, March 16th. Her mother's birthday, December 12th. Her father's, June 22nd. Aunt Martha's, September 9th. And finally, Charlotte's, October 30th. These weren't just numbers. They were pieces of the people who had shaped her life for better or worse. That evening, she carried Thai takeout into her small apartment, poured herself a glass of wine, and set the lottery tickets aside, without much thought. Birthdays had never been grand events for Cassie, and she didn't expect this one to be any different. It wasn't until 8:30 p.m. when she glanced at her phone that she remembered the drawing. She opened the lottery website absent-mindedly, fully expecting the usual disappointment. First number 3, a small smile, pure coincidence. Second number 16, her heart rate quickened. Third number 12, her palms began to sweat. Fourth number 21, she was holding her breath now. Fifth number 9, her vision tunneled. Final number 30. For a long, suspended moment, she simply stared at the screen, her mind refusing to process what her eyes saw. Then she whispered into the empty apartment no way. Her hands shook as she double-checked, triple-checked, even rewound the televised drawing to watch each number appear in sequence. Every single one matched. Cassie Wilson, broke, overlooked, underestimated, was now the sole winner of $47 million. Cassie didn't sleep that night. She sat at her small kitchen table, the lottery ticket lying in front of her like it was radioactive. Her laptop screen glowed in the dark as she dove deep into story after story. Real people whose lives have been turned upside down. Not by losing money, but by winning it. The headlines read like cautionary tales. Family torn apart after $22 million jackpot. Winner, bankrupt in 5 years. Friends and relatives demand payouts. Winner left isolated. She read about sudden lawsuits from strangers, about long-lost relatives appearing out of nowhere, about people who thought a windfall would set them free, only to find themselves trapped in a prison made of jealousy, greed, and expectation. One article in particular stuck with her. It called the lottery the fastest way to lose everything you care about. That was when Cassie made her decision. It wasn't hesitant or half-hearted. It was a vow, clear and unshakable, no one would know. Not her parents, not Lisa or Jason, not even Charlotte. She whispered it out loud into the stillness of her apartment as if speaking the words would make them binding. No one can know. Not now, maybe not ever. In that moment, the money was no longer just a dream, it was a responsibility. And Cassie knew that the only way to protect it and herself was to build walls so high that even the people closest to her couldn't see over them. The next morning, Cassie called in sick to work a first in over 3 years. Her voice was steady on the phone, but her mind raced with one goal: find a way to protect what she had just won before the world even knew it existed. She made an appointment with Philip Montgomery, a highly recommended attorney specializing in estate law and financial planning for high net worth clients. His office was in a sleek, glass-walled building downtown, the kind Cassie usually walked past without ever stepping inside. When she arrived, Philip greeted her with a warm but professional handshake. He was in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair, an expensive watch, and the calm demeanor of someone who had seen fortunes made and lost. Cassie placed the winning ticket on his desk. "I need to claim this without anyone knowing it's me," she said. Philip studied the ticket for a moment, his eyebrows lifting just slightly. Then he nodded. "You came to the right place." Over the next 2 hours, he outlined her options. In their state lottery, winners could legally remain anonymous by claiming through a trust or legal entity. He recommended a blind trust where a trustee could claim the prize on her behalf, shielding her identity from public record. They discussed asset allocation, how to divide the lump sum into different accounts to minimize risk. He explained the importance of a diversified portfolio, real estate, conservative stock, investments, bonds, and a cash reserve. Together, they began building what Philip called her financial fortress, a structure designed to withstand market changes, lawsuits, and even family disputes. The biggest mistake lottery winners make, Philip said, that leaning back in his chair, is telling too many people too soon. Once you do, you can't take it back. Cassie nodded, feeling both relief and gravity. The walls of her fortress were going up brick by careful brick. As Philip's words about family disputes echoed in her mind, Cassie couldn't help but revisit the memories that had taught her exactly why she needed to be careful. These weren't abstract warnings, these were scars she'd been carrying for years. The first was Jason, her charming older brother, always with a quick smile and a story that almost made you forget the mess behind him. 3 years ago, he'd called her late at night, his voice trembling. He said he needed $5,000 for rehab, swore it was his last chance to turn his life around. Cassie had emptied her modest savings account without hesitation. Months later, she found out he'd never gone to rehab at all. The money had vanished into nights he would never clearly remember. Then, there was Lisa, her younger sister, the golden child. Lisa had asked for help covering extra wedding expenses, another $2,000 on Cassie's credit card. I'll pay you back right after the honeymoon Lisa had promised, with that effortless confidence she seemed to wear like jewelry. That honeymoon was 5 years ago. The subject of repayment never came up again, except in Cassie's mind every time she opened her credit card statement. And her parents, they were a lesson in selective gratitude. When her father's roof was damaged in a storm, Cassie sent him money to help with repairs. Weeks later, she saw photos on social media of him and Stephanie lounging on a Cancun beach. Her mother, Diane, had her own version. She once asked Cassie for a little help with a home project, which turned out to be funding for something entirely different. In both cases, the money was taken, used elsewhere, and never acknowledged, not even with a proper thank you. Each of these moments had chipped away at her trust. She had learned that in her family, help was expected, repayment was optional, and gratitude was negotiable. That night, Cassie sat on her couch with the blinds half closed, the city lights outside blinking like they knew a secret. Her financial fortress was already in the works, but something heavier sat on her chest, a question that no investment plan could answer. She thought about Jason and Lisa, her parents, the way help had always flowed in one direction. She thought about all the times she had emptied her savings, maxed her credit card, or quietly adjusted her own life to make theirs easier. And then she thought about the silence, the excuses, the vanished promises. The lottery had given her something unimaginable, the freedom to never need anything from anyone again. But what gnawed at her was this: if she did need something, if she truly hit bottom, who would actually show up? It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about loyalty, about love, stripped of convenience. An idea began to take a shape risky, maybe even manipulative, but it pulled at her like a thread she couldn't stop tugging. What if she created a situation where she needed help? Not millions, just enough to matter, enough to see who would reach for her hand when there was nothing in it for them. By the time the clock struck midnight, the decision was quietly alive inside her. Cassie Wilson was going to test her family, and she suspected she already knew the answers she'd find. Cassie knew that if she was going to test her family, the story had to be airtight, believable enough to spark concern, but not so dramatic that it would draw suspicion. It couldn't be a car accident or a house fire. Those were too extreme, too easy for people to fact check. It had to be something painfully ordinary, the kind of bad luck that could happen to anyone. She settled on the idea late one evening, jotting notes in a small spiral notebook like she was preparing for a business pitch. Her cover story, the marketing firm where she worked, had suddenly shut down after losing its biggest clients. The CEO had been caught embezzling funds, and the company was now under investigation. With no warning, she'd been laid off. No final paycheck, no severance, just a box of her things, and a vague email from HR wishing her the best in her future endeavors. On top of that, she would sprinkle in a personal hardship, recent medical tests for concerning symptoms that had drained her emergency fund. She wouldn't name the condition. She knew the imagination of her family would do the rest. The ask was simple and specific. She needed $5,000 to cover her rent and medical bills until she found another job. Not an outrageous sum for her family's means, at least not for those who had once come to her for even more. It was a lie, yes, but a controlled one. Every detail was chosen to measure something real who would help her without calculating what they might get in return. With the lie fully constructed, Cassie's next step was to decide exactly who would hear it. She wasn't going to cast the net too wide. This wasn't about gossip. It was about gathering clean, controlled data. Each person on her list had a history with her, and almost all had been on the receiving end of her generosity at some point. She wrote the names down in neat, deliberate handwriting like she was preparing for a formal experiment. Gregory, her father, the man who could turn any conversation into a lecture on personal responsibility. Diane, her mother, whose warm concern often stopped just short of actual help. Lisa, the golden child younger sister, whose life seemed permanently cushioned. Jason, her older brother, a master at borrowing, but allergic to repayment. Stephanie, her stepmother, polished and practical, but never exactly welcoming. Warren, her stepfather, who had always made it clear that his money was for his family. Heather, her aunt on her father's side, a critic disguised as a relative. Ryan, Heather's son, the cousin with the gambling problem no one mentioned out loud. Martha, her mother's sister, the one person Cassie trusted to be genuine, though she had the least to give. Charlotte, her best friend, the only one she would deliberately leave out of the test. Charlotte's loyalty had been proven over and over. Cassie didn't need to measure it. Looking at the list, she felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. This wasn't just about asking for money, it was about stripping away the politeness and seeing the truth. And when it was over, Cassie knew she would have to live with whatever she found. Cassie stared at the list in her notebook, tapping the pen against the paper. She couldn't help but play out each conversation in her mind, hearing the tone, the excuses, even the pauses before the answers. She already knew who she could count on: Martha. Her aunt had the least to give, but she had always been the first to show up in times of trouble. Never with judgment, always with whatever she could scrape together. If anyone would help, it would be her. As for the others, Cassie didn't have much hope. Gregory would probably slip into teacher mode, reminding her about the importance of saving 6 months' expenses and questioning her spending habits before flatly saying no. Diane might sound sympathetic, but Cassie could almost hear her suggesting that maybe Lisa or Gregory could pitch in instead. Lisa would likely claim that the timing was bad private school tuition for the kids, a recent renovation, maybe even a new luxury purchase, to subtly justify why she couldn't help. Jason wouldn't even try to make it sound good. He'd either say he was broke or simply disappear mid-conversation. Stephanie and Warren, no chance. Stephanie would be polite but distant. Warren would remind her, as he always had, that she wasn't his financial responsibility. Heather would probably see it as proof she'd been right all along about Cassie's life choices, while Ryan might promise to help and then never follow through. The picture was already clear in her mind, but Cassie needed to see it in reality to have the truth confirmed once and for all. Cassie decided to start with her mother. Diane picked up on the third ring, her voice warm but distracted, like she was already doing 3 other things. "Hi, Mom." Cassie began softening her tone to sound tired, but not pitiful. She launched into the story: company closure, lost paycheck, the medical bill stacking up. Diane's sympathetic hums came at all the right places. And for a second, Cassie let herself wonder if her prediction might be wrong. But when Cassie finally asked for help, $5,000 to get her through, Diane hesitated. "Oh, honey, I wish I could," she sighed. "But Warren and I just put the down payment on the lake house. We're really cash poor right now." Then, almost casually, she added, "Maybe your father can help, or Lisa Paul makes good money at the hospital." Cassie forced a grateful response, even as the words lodged like splinters. Lisa was next. Cassie drove out to her pristine suburban home, the smell of new leather from a recently delivered Audi still lingering in the garage. They sat in her spotless kitchen, lattes in hand, as Cassie repeated the story. Lisa's face crumpled in sympathy. "Oh, Cass, that's awful. I can't believe they just closed like that." She reached across the counter to squeeze Cassie's hand, then came the pivot. But this really isn't a great time for us. We just bought the new car, the kids' tuition is due, and we're redoing the master bath. Paul's handling the budget and is well strict." Cassie nodded, swallowing the bitter taste in her throat. She'd heard this song before: compassion in the intro, excuses in the chorus. Gregory didn't bother with pleasantries. And the moment Cassie explained her situation, her father's voice hardened into that familiar, gruff lecture tone. "You're 34, Cassie. If you'd learned to save, instead of wasting money on lattes and gadgets, you wouldn't be in this mess." Cassie bit her tongue, resisting the urge to remind him about the countless times she'd bailed him out of debt. This wasn't about winning an argument, it was about seeing who would stand with her when she had nothing. But the answer clearly was not her father, Jason. Her older brother answered her call with background noise, blaring sports commentary, laughter, clinking glasses. "Hey sis, can I call you back? I am in the middle of something." He never did. By the next day, his phone went straight to voicemail. Heather, her aunt, had always been sharp-tongued, but Cassie still gave her the benefit of the doubt. That ended fast. $5,000, Heather scoffed. "Cassie, you've always had a flair for drama. I'm sure you'll land on your feet. You always do." The words dripped with sarcasm, and Cassie could almost see the smirk through the phone. Ryan, her cousin, was different at first. Oh my God, Cass, of course, let me just move some things around. I'll text you tonight. She never got that text. By the weekend, Ryan's social media was full of beach photos from a last minute getaway. One by one, the answers came in, and each one told her the same thing. Her family's loyalty was conditional. The phone rang before Cassie could even decide whether to dial Martha's number. Cass, honey, I saw your missed call earlier. I don't know what's going on, but if you're in trouble, I want you to know I can help. Martha's voice came through warm and steady, like the sound of a blanket being wrapped around cold shoulders. Cassie hesitated. This was her aunt, who'd been battling health issues for years, a retired elementary school teacher living on a modest pension. Martha wasn't someone Cassie ever wanted to burden. But before she could piece together her lie, Martha continued. I've got $3,000 saved up, she said simply, as if offering her last drop of water to someone in the desert. It's most of what I have, but your family. And if it helps, you can stay here with me for a while. No rent, no fuss. Cassie's throat tightened. She spent days collecting polished excuses and veiled rejections from people she once thought would be her safety net. And here was Martha, fragile in health, limited in means, offering not just her money, but her home, without a single condition. It wasn't the money that undid her. It was the unquestioning love behind it. Cassie sat at Martha's small kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched. The steam had long faded, but her pulse still raced. And Martha, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything. Martha nodded, her kind eyes fixed on Cassie's face. I didn't really lose my job. Cassie began, her voice barely above a whisper. And I don't need $5,000. The truth is, I won the lottery. 47 million. The words hung in the air like a crack of thunder in a silent field. Martha blinked, her brow furrowing, not in anger, but in confusion. And the thing about needing help, it was a test. I wanted to see who would be there for me if I had nothing to give. Cassie's throat tightened, guilt pressing against every syllable. I'm so sorry I put you in that position. Martha leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. Cassie, I'm not angry, just sad. Sad that you've been hurt so badly by people who should have loved you without condition. Sad that you even felt the need to test it. Her voice softened. But I'm glad you know now. And I'm glad I passed, though honestly, I would have done the same if you had $1 million or a dime. For the first time since the jackpot, Cassie felt her chest loosen, not from the money, but from being truly seen. Martha leaned back, her gaze drifting to the small window above the sink. You know, Cassie, I wasn't always careful with money. There was a time when I thought love meant trusting without question. Cassie stayed quiet, sensing the weight in her aunt's tone. My ex-husband Martha continued, her voice steady, but tinged with a sadness that had been polished smooth by time. Knew I had an inheritance from my grandmother. I thought we were building a life together. But slowly, he found ways to convince me we needed it for a business idea, for debt I didn't even know he had. And one day, it was gone, all of it. She clasped her hands together, the knuckles pale. That money didn't turn him into a liar or a thief. He was already that man. The money just made it easier for him to show it. Cassie's chest tightened. That's the thing about money, Cassie. Martha said, her eyes meeting hers. It doesn't change people. It magnifies who they already are. If someone's selfish, they'll be worse with wealth. If someone's kind, they'll use it to lift others. You have to decide which one you want to be and protect yourself from those who've already made their choice. Cassie felt the words settle deep, like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known was there. Martha rested her hand gently over Cassie's. Her voice was calm, but carried the kind of certainty that only comes from hard-earned scars. Cassie, listen to me. No one has a right to your money except you. Not family, not friends, not anyone who thinks they're entitled just because they share your blood or your history. Cassie's throat tightened, a knot of relief and guilt twisting together. You don't use money to buy love, Martha went on. Real love doesn't come with a price tag, and if it does, it's not love, it's leverage. Use your money to build something lasting, something that brings real value to your life and to others. That's the only way it won't own you. Cassie nodded slowly, feeling the truth sink into her bones. For the first time since she'd held that winning ticket, she felt in control not of the numbers in her bank account, but of the power they represented. Cassie arranged the chairs in her small living room, the air already thick with unspoken tension, before anyone arrived. One by one, they filed in Gregory, with his stiff jaw, Diane clutching her designer purse, Lisa scrolling her phone, Jason avoiding eye contact. Heather and Ryan came together whispering as if they already knew the ending of a story they hadn't heard. She didn't bother with small talk. Once they were all seated, Cassie stood hands clasped in front of her, voice steady. "I asked each of you for help when I was at my lowest," she began. $5,000, not for a vacation, not for a luxury, just to keep a roof over my head and pay hospital bills. Her eyes moved from face to face, pausing just long enough to let the silence weigh on them. "I remember exactly what each of you said," Cassie continued. "The excuses, the deflections, the way some of you made me feel like I was a burden." No one spoke. Lisa shifted in her chair. Gregory crossed his arms. Cassie took a breath, her voice still calm but sharper now. "This meeting isn't about guilt. It's about clarity. I needed to know who would be there when I had nothing to give in return. And I do know now." For a moment, the room was silent, too silent. Then, like a dam, breaking voices erupted. Lisa was the first to speak, her tone defensive. "You didn't tell us how serious it was. If I'd known Gregory," cut in his voice, sharp. "Maybe if you learned to manage your money, you wouldn't have been in that situation in the first place?" Heather scoffed. "Sounds like drama to me. People exaggerate when they want handouts." Ryan mumbled something about bad timing and how he'd been just about to call her back. Jason stayed quiet, staring at the floor, but the tension in his jaw said everything. Cassie didn't flinch. She listened, hands folded in her lap, eyes calm but unreadable. She wasn't here to argue, not to justify, and certainly not to reveal the truth that she was now worth $47 million. Instead, when the noise died down, she simply said, "It's okay. I've heard enough to understand," and that was it. No anger, no explanation. Cassie felt it not like a sudden thunderclap, but like the quiet breaking of a chain she didn't even realize she'd been dragging for years. As her relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, fumbling for excuses or looking anywhere but at her, she understood something for the first time. She didn't need their approval to exist. For years, she'd shaped her life around earning their respect, trying to be good enough for people who never truly saw her. Now, sitting there, she felt lighter, untethered. Inside, a small, steady voice whispered, "You're free, Cassie. They don't own your worth. You do." She leaned back, a faint smile tugging at her lips. They thought this was about money. It wasn't. It was about the invisible hold they had over her, and how easily it could dissolve when she decided to let it go. Cassie stood in the doorway of the little brick house, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors. It wasn't a mansion. It didn't need to be. It was hers. Bought outright, no mortgage, no strings. A few blocks away, contractors were putting the final touches on another home, bright, cozy, and wheelchair accessible. That one was for Martha. When Cassie handed her the keys, Martha's hands trembled. "Cassie." "I can't, you can," Cassie said softly. "And you will. This is yours. No rent, no conditions. Just a thank you." They stood there in the quiet, two women bound not by blood, but by the rare kind of loyalty that money can't buy. Cassie made a silent promise Martha will never have to wonder where she belongs. Not as long as I'm here. The idea came to Cassie one evening as she sat on her porch sipping tea and watching the sun sink behind the rooftops. She thought of Martha, of the quiet kindness that had changed her life, and of the countless older folks out there alone, unheard, and often struggling in silence. Within weeks, Open Porch was born. The mission was simple but powerful: repair aging homes so their owners could live safely, cover medical bills that insurance ignored, and send volunteers not just to deliver groceries but to sit, listen, and remind the elderly that they mattered. Cassie kept her name out of it, letting the foundation speak for itself. But she was there, reviewing applications, visiting home, holding the hands of people who thought the world had forgotten them. Every smile, every thank you hug felt like a quiet victory. Cassie realized she wasn't just spending money. She was building something that could outlive her, and that was worth more than any jackpot. Cassie never told anyone, not even Martha, about the quiet checks she sent. When her father Gregory was hospitalized with a heart condition, she covered the entire bill under the name of a community relief fund. He never knew where the money came from, only that the debt collector stopped calling. When her cousin Ryan finally hit rock bottom and checked into a rehab clinic, Cassie prepaid for his full treatment, signing the donor line with nothing but the words, "a friend." It wasn't about forgiveness, it wasn't even about reconciliation. It was about breaking the cycle, about choosing compassion without opening the door to old wounds. Cassie knew they might never change, but she could. And that to her was the real win. By the time the dust settled, Cassie had something far more valuable than $47 million clarity. She finally saw that money is not a magic wand. It doesn't turn selfish people generous or cold hearts warm. It's a magnifying glass burning away the illusions and showing the truth you may have been too afraid to see. For Cassie, the truth was both painful and liberating. Her father, Gregory, who once lectured her about learning to save, still carried the same pride that kept him from helping her when she asked. Lisa, Jason, Heather, and Ryan, each reaction from them was like a mirror, reflecting who they had always been. The excuses, the deflections, the hollow sympathy, all of it told her more than words ever could. And then there was Aunt Martha, the one who had the least to give, yet gave the most. She reminded Cassie that kindness has nothing to do with the size of your bank account and everything to do with the size of your heart. Cassie learned something she would carry for the rest of her life. Real love never demands payment, but it absolutely requires boundaries. You can open your arms without opening your vault. You can be generous without letting someone drain you empty. Now, Cassie was no longer living for their approval. She had built a life where her choices were her own. Her circle was small but real, and her wealth was a tool, not a trap. Money hadn't changed her. It had set her free. Money is the ultimate truth serum. It doesn't change who someone is. It simply reveals them. Kindness doesn't come from a bank account. It comes from the heart. That's why you should never let wealth determine the value of your relationships. Build healthy boundaries, give wisely, and protect your heart so you can keep your goodness without being taken advantage of. If you believe stories like this can change the way we see people and life, hit subscribe right now. Don't forget to tap the notification bell so you never miss a powerful emotional story again. Every subscription from you inspires us to keep bringing more real-life lessons that move, challenge, and stay with you long after the video ends.